It was another quiet midnight shift at the gas station, a routine I had grown accustomed to over the years. As a small-statured woman working alongside my partner, who took the other half of the week, we had developed a rapport with the regulars. They were the lifeblood of the place, familiar faces that brought a sense of comfort in the stillness of the night. This gas station, nestled in a sketchy area, stood as a lone beacon of light amidst the encroaching darkness, surrounded by shadows that often concealed more than they revealed. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I felt the familiar chill creeping into my bones, not just from the cold air, but from the unnerving quiet that enveloped the station. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting unsettling shadows across the aisles. I could hear the faint hum of the coolers, but other than that, the silence felt oppressive. I often imagined the gas station as a character of its own, with secrets buried deep within its walls, waiting for someone to unearth them. One of my regulars, a man who worked in the metro an hour away, would stop in every morning for his cigarettes. He had a stern demeanor and rarely smiled, but there was something in his eyes that hinted at a deep well of experience. Each time he came in, I found myself fascinated by him. I often wondered what stories he carried with him, stories that perhaps mirrored the darker corners of my own life. Determined to break the ice, I spent months trying to make him smile. I remembered the first time I saw him. He walked in with a heavy air around him, as if he bore the weight of the world on his shoulders. The way he shifted his eyes around the store spoke volumes about the life he led outside of this gas station. Finally, after many attempts at small talk, I managed to get it right one morning by having his cigarettes ready on the counter, already scanned and waiting for him as he walked in. When he saw that, a small smile flickered across his face, a brief glimmer of warmth in an otherwise cold routine. It was a breakthrough, a moment where the invisible barrier between us cracked open, allowing a sliver of connection to shine through. "Do you ever get scared on the night shift?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "You're a small girl. It's not safe." The seriousness in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I felt a twinge of fear at his words, but I tried to remain composed. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but we can lock the doors and hide if we have to. The provincial police have a station close by and come in often." I wanted to reassure him, to show him that I was capable of handling myself. But as I spoke, I realized how thin that safety net felt in the dead of night. His gaze turned distant, as if lost in a memory that brought him back to another time and place. He began to tell me a story that chilled me to the core. It was a story from the late 80s, when he had first moved to our country from Eastern Europe with his wife and child. He worked the night shift at a gas station, just like I did. "One night, I fell asleep at work," he said, his eyes darkening with the weight of his words. "When I woke up, the phone had been ringing for hours. My manager was shaking me, panicked, asking if I was all right." As he spoke, I could feel the tension building in the air. The way he recalled that moment made my heart race. I thought everything was fine. I apologized, but my manager was furious. "Look outside," he shouted. I was confused, so I went to the window. All our motor oil was missing, and the outside was a complete mess. My pulse quickened as he continued. The room felt colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch ominously. It turned out thieves had come and stolen everything while I slept, leaving me unharmed. They went to the next station down the road where the clerk was awake. He fought back, and they stabbed him to death, leaving him to bleed out. A shiver ran down my spine as I processed what he was saying. "If you ever feel sleepy," he advised, his voice serious, "just lock the door and do it. It might save your life." His story lingered in the air long after he left, a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. The gas station was often filled with an eerie quietness, and I felt the weight of the darkness closing in. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that night. I felt like I was part of a horror movie, trapped in a gas station with shadows that could come to life at any moment. As the night wore on, I became hyper-aware of every sound, the wind rustling outside, the faint hum of the refrigeration units, the distant sound of a car driving by. My mind began to play tricks on me, and I swore I could hear whispers carried by the wind. The thought of locking the door and shutting my eyes crossed my mind, but I remembered the man's warning. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, not even for a second. Suddenly, The door swung open and my heart raced. A figure stepped in, shrouded in darkness. I squinted, trying to make out the features, my pulse pounding in my ears. It was just a customer, but the feeling of dread lingered as I took their order. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease that had settled deep within me. After they left, I felt the weight of isolation pressing down. The story played on repeat in my mind, each detail more vivid than the last. I felt like a character in a horror movie, trapped in a gas station with shadows that could come to life at any moment. My thoughts drifted back to the clerk who had fought back, the one who hadn't been lucky enough to sleep through a robbery. What if the same fate awaited me? As my shift came to an end, I couldn't wait to leave. I stepped outside into the cold air, feeling a sense of relief wash over me as the familiar lights of the parking lot greeted me. The world felt safer outside the confines of the station, and I promised myself that I would never take those moments for granted again. The next night, as I settled into my shift, I couldn't shake the lingering thoughts from the previous evening. I found myself glancing at the door every few minutes, half expecting someone to walk in. I was suddenly acutely aware of how vulnerable I was, alone in the gas station at night, surrounded by the dark streets. The sound of the pumps running was the only noise breaking the stillness, and my heart raced with every creak of the building. Then, just as I began to feel comfortable again, the power flickered. The lights dimmed momentarily, casting unsettling shadows around the room. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that it was just a storm outside, but my mind couldn't help but conjure images of the past. Was it just a coincidence, or did the universe have something more sinister planned? That night, I noticed a man standing outside, his face obscured by the shadows. He seemed to be watching the gas station intently. Panic surged through me as I reached for the phone, but the line was dead. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to convince myself it was just a figment of my imagination. When the man finally stepped closer, I could see he was just a regular customer, but the fear I felt was all-consuming. The memory of the clerk who had fought back echoed in my mind. Was I prepared to face a similar fate? I forced a smile, serving him quickly and watching as he left, feeling the weight of dread lift slightly as the door closed behind him. As the clock ticked closer to dawn, I found myself lost in thought, reflecting on the stories shared by my customers. I thought about the man from the metro and his warnings. Did he know the real dangers of the night? Did he understand the unspoken bond that formed between those of us who worked the midnight shifts? Finally, my shift came to an end. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief as I stepped outside into the pale morning light, grateful for another night survived. I couldn't help but think about the man who had shared his story with me. I hoped he was safe and that his own night shifts had been uneventful. As I drove away, I promised myself I would carry his words with me. The importance of staying alert, of locking the door, of never letting my guard down. I still think about that man often, wondering if he's still working the night shift somewhere, sharing stories with the young clerks who come after him. I hope he's found happiness and that his grandchildren bring him joy. But more than anything, I hope he knows that his warning saved my life. The world may be filled with shadows, but we have the power to light our own way. And as I drive away, I know one thing for certain. Those of us who work the night shifts share an unspoken connection, a bond forged in the stillness of the night and the stories that haunt us. The gas station may be just a building, but to me it represents the thin line between safety and danger, the familiar and the unknown. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more spine-tingling tales, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. Don't forget to check out all our other videos for more thrilling and haunting stories.